The installation of the TUTCO control panel requires supplying power to the unit and safely wiring the various components. Like all electrical component wiring, it's important to carefully follow all electrical safety instructions. Most will start by wiring the 240/480 volt power input line to the control panel circuit breaker. Please note, there are no pre-punched holes in the panel. Consider the components' locations and use an appropriate sized hole punch to provide access to the circuit breaker. When punching holes in the box, use caution to clean up any metal fragments. The hole punched will require the appropriate wire locking fittings and gaskets. The hex head terminals for connecting the power lines reside behind a finger safe cover. Using a Phillips head screwdriver, remove the finger safe cover guard to expose the 3 power lead terminals. Feed the 3 phases of input wire into the terminals and securely tighten the hex bolt using a 5/32 hex wrench. The ground wires connect to the left of the circuit breaker in the DIN rail connector identified as ground in green. Don't forget to attach the input safety protective cover over the input terminals when complete. The next step is to verify that the transformer clip is in the right position for the control voltage connected. The unit should be set at 480 volt from the factory as default. If 240 volt is needed, install the spare jumper clip to change the transformer from 480 to 240 volt. The first thing required to do is to remove the transformer wire safety cover. Refer to the labeling on the transformer for all input connections. There are 4 screws, top and bottom, that wire up both the input and output sides of the transformer. You're concerned with the top. As default, the input jumper is connected to the middle 2 screws labeled 3 and 2 for 480 volt power line connections. We're now going to change the 240 volt input wiring jumpers. For 240 volt input wiring, the jumper should be connected between 1 and 3, open between 3 and 2, and then connected again between 2 and 4. Remove the existing clip by loosening the screws. The jumper will easily be removed without entirely loosening the screws. Don't forget to add the finger safe cover back on when done. With the input power configured properly, move on to the heater connections. In the bottom left-hand corner of the control panel are the heater wiring connections. Thermocouples, start, stop, and remote e-stop connections are all angled in the DIN rail for easier termination. The heater ground terminal and the L1, L2, and L3 terminals are used to connect the heater. Once again, you may want to punch a hole on the bottom or the side of the panel for easy access. Using a flathead screwdriver, insert the 3 poles from the heater into the terminal blocks and tighten until secure. Next, let's wire the thermocouple connections and the system controls based on the application and specific heater. There are 2 thermocouple sensor blocks. They are labeled 1TC and 2TC. 1TC is for your high limit temperature sensor connection. 2TC is for the process temperature control sensor. The left terminal is positive and the right terminal is negative. The final step in wiring is the remote control and application-based connections. The controller can be run at the panel or remotely from a push-button station or PLC. There are 5 customer interface connections. The labeling instructions for these connections are on the inside of the door panel. There is an e-stop, a remote stop, a flow sensor connection, and a remote start. Look at the terminal blocks. There is a remote e-stop across terminals 1 and 3. Terminals 7, 8 are for the remote stop command. Terminals 8 and 9 are for the flow sensor or any other device used to stop the heater from working due to an unwanted condition. Terminals 10 and 11 are not used at this time. Above the thermocouple block, you will see a selector switch that allows you to choose between local and remote control. In local mode, all the temperature controls will come directly from the front of the panel. You will find the controls for start, stop, reset on the front door of the controller. Except for an e-stop, no other remote controls will function while set to local. When you switch to remote, the controls on the front of the panel, including start, stop, reset, will not function. The LEDs will light up, however. All commands will now come from a remote station or PLC when in remote. Next to the local and remote selector switch is the temperature high limit setting. It's a manual temperature setting that limits power to the heater. The last step before activating the power lines and running the heater is setting the high limit control. Typically, this setting is at 0 as a default. Fahrenheit is in black, Celsius is in red. Be sure to check the heater specifications in the manual for the proper high limit settings.